Hello and welcome to the second episode of Side of the Desk. Each month we'll be chatting to influential industry leaders to explore their journey to success and the role that recruitment played throughout. We are currently streaming live for you to watch or listen instantly. And if you can't join us today, don't stress, I get it, life is busy. So joining me today is Meg Strahle, the Sustainability Manager at The Bulb. Meg has a decade worth of education and experience across the events, hospitality and tourism industry in the US, UK and Australia. Meg has taken her passion for sustainability to join The Bulb in 2021 as the newest sustainability advisor. Meg has worked on a variety of projects, including creating the sustainability strategy for an interactive experience at COP26, supporting a global ISO certification process, and producing the equality, diversity and inclusion strategy to drive social sustainability for the opening and closing ceremonies for the Birmingham Commonwealth Games. Welcome, Meg. That was the longest intro I think I've ever done. Would you like to add anything to that?
No, we've done some amazing work since the Commonwealth Games. We have been producing, I'll just tell you later. We can just jump right in.
No worries. Well, look, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in years. Last time I was speaking to you, I think you were Cornwall. But just before we get started, we are live, which means you can share comments and thoughts in the comment box. I'm probably pointing to the wrong way. If you want to just introduce yourself or let us know where you are in the world. So we've got all that out of the way, Meg. Now we can get into the nice meaty stuff. Let's just get things sort of kicked straight in. I really like this question, and it really sort of brings out, what people have done in events. But how did you actually get into the sector? How did that start for you?
Yeah, so I feel like I've had quite, I don't know if you heard of this terminology, a squiggly career. So when I was 18, I had no idea what I wanted to do. In America, gap years are not really that common. You should go to university as soon as you graduate high school. So my undergraduate was actually in journalism and media. And when I graduated, the only places you can really get jobs is in New York City or LA. I am not a city girl. I absolutely do not want to live in either one of those cities. So I had what you call a quarter-life crisis. And I decided I just got a full-time job in retail to kind of figure out what are my next steps. And someone I knew had just started a full-service wedding planning business. And she was like, I need some help. Why don't you join me? You seem like you'd be a great fit for this role. It was love at first glance. Like literally everything that you could think of went wrong. But I loved how fast-paced everything was. Everything was just moving all the time. And over the years, I've worked in catering. I volunteered a ton in sporting events, nonprofits. I even went back into academia. So now fast forward to 2020, when the pandemic hit, I was at a standstill. I was like, I don't know what I want to do next. I wanted to get a PhD, but I wanted to work more first. So I decided to fast track my education and I moved to England to get my research degree in sustainable futures. And about a year later, I applied to the job that I have now, which is sustainability. At the time, it was a sustainability assistant for a consultant for the events industry. And I knew I wanted to get into that. I just didn't know how to get from point A to point B until someone pointed out this job on LinkedIn saying, I think this would be a great fit for you because you've been talking about how much you want to do this, and the rest is history.
It's so interesting. I love that love at first event. We'll steal that as the strapline for the session. I think it's interesting you said about your studies there, just on the sort of media. You know me. I do a lot of stuff with unis, and we still don't see that crossover, do we, from events as a career in media? I mean, you think about now with hybrid and the event tech, we still don't go and reach out to other people in unis. And especially sort of leading you into sustainability, that is now, I think I can confidently say, sustainability 2 or 3 years ago used to be a bit of a sort of, oh, we're sustainable, and it was nice to say. But I'm seeing people invest in that now, and obviously with you, like, do you see a change, like just in your career, of sustainability and where that's become actionable rather than just something people talk about?
Yes, there has been massive change, not just because people want to, but we have to. There is now an urgency that we need to think about our future, not just as a business, but for future generations. If we don't do something soon, we might not have a planet for our future generations in 10 years. And events, as we know, are one of the most polluting industries in the world, but we can't just not have events. They're places where people can network, do business, and all of that. And experiences are just a part of life. That's never going to go away. And I think people are realizing we need to do something because clients are asking for sustainability. And if you don't make a change for sustainability soon, you will hear from your attendees being like, why are you not doing something now? So it's definitely interesting seeing people decide, okay, we're going to do something, but then they don't know where to start. And that's where my role and people like me who work in sustainability consulting come in. We kind of handhold them along the way and give them the tools to be able to succeed. And at COP27, actually, there is a collaboration between IMEX and IBTM. They created the roadmap to net zero, and that just launched last week? Maybe it's 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure what year it is. That is hopefully going to give event organizers the tools to be able to say, okay, this is what I need to do, and this is how I get there.
You can almost see the evolution of sustainability, can't you? And it's scary. We've had to wait till we get to a have to before action. And even then, if we've known about this 2-3 years, really it's been forefront. The key thing there, though, isn't it, is when clients start saying, I won't give you business unless you're doing it, weirdly enough, people suddenly do it. But I love the whole idea of tools like that, because, myself, there's things you want to do, but there's no point everybody starting from scratch because no one will ever start, will they? So people like yourself, that's what we need, is people that we can say, right, there's someone that knows what they're doing, because there's that wonderful phrase, isn't there? It's like, it's better to do something. No, not everyone can do everything, but everyone can do something. And that to me is sustainability, I think. And do you think that's what keeps you energized? Is that what keeps you, the passion alive, the energy for you in the industry?
Yes, I love what I do. Sustainability can be hard because it's draining. You don't see change fast enough. And then as part of my job, you have to watch the news. You have to see what countries are doing, new initiatives, new laws, new rules, new everything. I have to be on top of everything so that we can integrate it into our plans for our clients. And it can get exhausting because most of it is so negative these days. But I do have an incredible supporting boss. And I think that makes all the difference in how I feel about my job. I think if I had someone who was like, just do your work, go home, she understands when things get hard and tired. She says, okay, you know what? Take a 15-minute break, go walk outside and come back and just smash things out. And I think that helps me keep motivated to do really well and bring the best for our clients.
Hearing you say draining and exhausted sounds like recruitment. No, it's quite. My wife's actually a marine planner. She completely changed her job sort of 2-3 years ago. She's a national planner now for the MMO, the Marine Management Organization, and that is the biggest thing she says is the time that things take. So her job is, anything coastal, anything marine based, both economical and environmental. They have to, reports and so. And like you said, you've got people saying, I don't care. I want to build my new thing. And other people saying, yeah, but we've got to think of the long. How does that sort of, draining and exhausting are really strong emotive words. How do you still sort of keep going? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you are basically helping the planet for the future generations. That's what I say to my wife. But how does that sort of how do you keep motivated with sustainability?
Knowing that we make a change. There have been some of the people we work with will come to us and say, oh my gosh, you've made me think a different way, where we've decided to go with the more sustainable material in a design build, and you really inspired us, you really helped us. Just like those little comments throughout the weeks that we get keeps us going, because we're like, yes, we are making a change. This is someone reaching out to us and saying, we listened to your training talk and we feel so motivated. I'm going to go away and try to figure out how can I integrate this into my team and my client work. and also seeing up and coming students message me or my boss being like, we're really interested in this industry. I've got 2 years left of school. What can I do now so that when I get into the industry, I can help whatever agency I work for become more sustainable? It's small things like that keep you going. So if you have someone who's working in sustainability or even D&I, tell them that they're doing a good job, especially if you feel inspired, because you never know what someone's going through behind the camera, behind the computer. And just small things like that tell us that we're doing a good job, we're going in the right direction.
I think that's probably right for any. I think anybody needs that, but it must be really hard with sustainability. I mean, is there, what can, I don't want to jump this on you because we will sort of get onto the recruitment angle, but I think sustainability is so important as well. What about is there sort of things we can do is there something the likes of me can do? Is there something just, because I remember I saw something, I think it was the 1%, it used to be called, on bottled water or something like that. And that was an amazing thing, but you sort of end up like, okay, well, I don't use bottled water, but you end up doing it. Is there anything sort of, have you got a bit of advice there just on the sustainability, like just try doing this, or have you thought about this? Anything there that we can take as takeaways?
I mean, you just use the bottled water example, so I can't quite use that. But if you're having a large event in a country where you don't want to be using tap water, then that's a challenging thing. I think the one thing that every event organizer can do now is just work with your supply chain. Ask them to stop wrapping things in plastic saran wrap. That's one of the biggest polluters, because you arrive at an event, everything's wrapped in saran wrap. Use like old blankets or something else, flight cases. You can do that. And even suppliers now are like, we need to do better. Everyone wants to have the conversation, but us as an agency, organizer, small business, we need to start that conversation and say, hey, we're going to be implementing this. We don't want any plastic on site. And saran wrap is one of the biggest ones. So removing that and starting that conversation with suppliers saying, we want to do better and we want to help you do better, because I don't believe in just cutting people off because they're not sustainable right now, because that doesn't help anyone. You want to create a relationship and be on that journey with them so that you and your supply chain can be more sustainable and continue working together.
It's the supply chain thing's so interesting. The pushback we always used to get is cost. And you mentioned clients saying now they're the ones driving it, saying if you're not sustainable, you could lose business. Are clients happier now? Do you think, well, not happy, that's probably the wrong word, but do you think clients are more open to understanding that, like it or not at the moment, if you want to do these sort of things, there is an added cost because it's not normal? It will be, won't it? It will just become part of, and everything would tie down. But are you seeing clients being a bit more open to that now?
Yes and no. There are some, like I'm seeing both sides of the story, and I understand budget is a tricky one. It's a tricky conversation. But yes, we can spend more money to purchase sustainable materials, but it's really more about what are you doing with those materials after the event, because most of the time we just throw it away and don't think about it. Is there a way we can keep that material and repurpose it into future events? So that way, in the long run, the cost will decrease because you've already got those materials that you're able to take apart and then create a new build with.
Wow. And you mentioned, talking about your journey now, you mentioned your journey into the sector. You mentioned LinkedIn. Other job boards are available, by the way. But you mentioned your journey into it. I mean, recruitment as a word has many connotations, many thoughts. What about you? Like, what does recruitment mean to you in either your daily life or your career today? What's it meant to you?
So, funny story. I watched that movie with Mila Kunis and Justin Timberlake, where Mila Kunis is a headhunter and she recruits Justin Timberlake. I can't remember what role he was. He's like a big boss, something, and they become friends with benefits or whatever. That's the whole movie.
Is it called Friends with Benefits?
Mila Kunis as a headhunter, I was like, oh, that's what recruitment is. It's headhunting. But it wasn't until, this is years ago, like 10 years ago, it wasn't until LinkedIn became more popular. I met you and heard more about what recruitment is. And now I really think it's about finding, you have a job, right? And you need to find a person that has the skill set to do the job, but not just the skill set, but can they fit with the people who already work at that company? So it's finding the skill set and kind of merging that together to make sure that is the right fit for both the person and the company. And I find that so interesting because that's not an easy thing to do. You can't just throw people into jobs and hope for the best. But recruitment, I think, takes that extra step.
And what about you? You're absolutely right, by the way. I'll have that as my next advert. And what about you? Like, have you worked with recruitment agencies? Have you, during interviews, how have you found recruitment? With you specifically as well. How have you found recruitment being in your life?
So interestingly, I've never had a personal experience with recruitment. In the past, my jobs have been word of mouth and just literally pure luck. I'm at a networking event. Someone came up and talked to me, and after 10 minutes, she was like, "Do you want to work for me?" Or, for example, the job I have now, someone tagged me on LinkedIn. So it's kind of pure luck and hard work. But I do, because I graduated from University of Exeter last year, I do get recruitment emails from Russell Group. It's like a Russell Group recruitment. I guess their job is to find graduates from Russell colleges. I'm American, so I don't understand what any of that means. But they're always emailing me about entry-level roles. And I'm like, if you take the time to look at my LinkedIn, you know that I'm old. I'm not looking for entry-level, and the things that you ask me for, I'm either not interested in or have no experience in. If you take the time to look at my LinkedIn, you'll see this is my background and how many years of experience I already have. So every time I email back saying, "No, thank you. I love my job. I'm happy where I am now. Thanks," they always get snarky. So that's my only experience of recruitment.
Oh, that's such a shame. And unfortunately, it's a lot of people's experience. If you can believe it, I get emails constantly from recruiters saying, "Hey, we've got jobs that we think would match you." And I always go back and say, "Have you, check my profile?" The thing is, Meg, it's called phishing with a PH. And it's, LinkedIn. LinkedIn's wonderful, but it's also the worst thing. It's also the worst thing that's ever happened because they can just mass email. And that is what people's thoughts is of recruitment. And don't get me wrong, I'm on LinkedIn all the time, but it's interesting you called yourself lucky, whereas, you've been to university, you've studied, you've worked, you've careered, you've networked, you've done everything to put yourself in a position that people come to. That's not luck. That's people saying, "I want to work with you." And you are going to have to, kiss a few frogs, unfortunately, that are going to try and get in touch. But it's interesting that, word of mouth is one of the greatest ways of recruiting. Unfortunately, in our industry, do see it changing now. That is changing a bit because people make mistakes because it's like, well, this is my friend, and then they can't say no. But it's great to hear you getting a job like that. It's not all about recruitment agencies. This is about recruitment, as a whole. And you mentioned that was your own personal experience. Do you have any nice recruitment stories though? Either, recruiting yourself, being like companies or anything like that?
So interestingly, with this question, I was thinking, I've never been recruited. I don't have a story to share. But then I remembered it's not a nice, happy recruitment story. This is more of a horror story. Back in 2015, when I was living in the UK, the first time around, I was applying to tons of jobs. Brexit had just happened. So every foreigner was having the same struggle, trying to find a job when politics was uncertain. No one wanted to hire us because they didn't know what was going to happen next year. So I applied to a job for an event organizer. The job said event organizer, and they put the roles for the event organizer. So I show up to this freezing cold room in the middle of London where tons of people are waiting, and I had to fill out a form. And then they said, "Okay, thank you, come back tomorrow." So I went back the next day, and they took a group of us, to a mall shopping center and said, "Okay, we're going to teach you about sales. This is what we're going to be doing on the site to do sales." And I'm in my head, I'm like, I applied for an event organizer role. What am I doing here? And they essentially wanted us to read a script and then go onto the stand and then sell the thing. And I'm sitting there, I have like a pit in my stomach, I feel sick. I'm not good with confrontation. I'm like feeling so sick to my stomach. And it's this big dude. And I was like, you know what? I just have to do it because I don't want to sit and then say yes to everything because that's just, I'm not comfortable. So I told him, this is not what I applied for. This is, I don't know what we're doing. And he's like, you should have known. And he was so upset that I was leaving halfway through the interview. But the relief we felt when I walked out that door, but the job description and the role that I applied for didn't match what I was being interviewed for. It was absolutely mortifying.
That's, I don't think I'll ever hear it. That doesn't even sound like a job description thing. That sounds like you're lucky you didn't end up in the back of a van by the sounds of things. And they just wanted you to be on a stand in a shopping centre selling stuff.
Yeah, so I think we don't really go to shopping centres anymore, so I don't know if they still do it. It was like a booth, and then you try to sell like cell phone plans, or like you have to yell at people like, hey you, are you interested in this product? Let me tell you about it.
Oh my God.
I did not want to do that.
I mean, that happened. I mean, it's very loosely called experiential, but that's like the sort of sampling side. But you know, brand ambassadors usually do that, who know they're going in for an interview to talk about that. That's insane. That must have been quite scary, actually. That must have been quite daunting.
Yeah, here I am so excited because I thought, I was like, okay, great. I'm going to get an event organizer job. Everything's going to be fine. Then that happened. And I was like, get me out of here.
Jesus, that is really scary. I mean, that almost, I think you might know the next, try and say a different one, but that probably sounds like it. What about jobs you've actually done? Like, without saying company names, you don't have to, but what would you say apart from that one, which sounds terrible? What would you say is like the worst job you've had to do? Not maybe the job as a whole, but the worst thing about a job you've had to do.
Interestingly enough, I don't think there has ever been a worst, because every job I've had has been kind of like a stepping stone to where I am now. But if I had to pick one, it probably would have been when I worked in retail, because you get just terrible customers. Like, we're told the customer is always right. So we can't respond if a customer comes in and we just don't have what they want. They get angry. I've been yelled at by people because the guy couldn't read signage and thought he could return a pair of shoes anywhere, but he had to go across the room to the shoe section because they work on commission, but I didn't work on commission. And he yelled at me. This was like Christmas time, so it was absolutely crazy. And I'm standing there trying not to cry because I have this massive line behind this guy waiting for people to check out. So I'm just like being a robot trying to get people out the door. So there has been bad parts of retail, but there have also been good parts where people have come back looking for me to have me help them. Like, they remembered that it was a great customer service and they came back and they wanted to work with me. So it's both bad and good, but I think that job helped me learn more communication skills for what I'm doing now. So even if someone is upset, we have to keep it professional instead of responding the way that you want to respond and how you feel on the inside.
Jeez, I think I've led a very sheltered life, Meg. Wow. I mean, I think the thing with that, I'm hoping you don't get that now. You don't get people shouting at you. I bet you would have 3 years ago when when we were doing sustainability and no one wanted to pay the cost of it. I bet there was lots of conversations like that. Wow, that's you're hardcore, Meg, aren't you? You are hardcore. I tell you that. That's something I would never imagine. What about, so if we talk about sustainability in the events again, let's sort of bring it back to now, like the sector, and I'm assuming it will be sustainability led, but what do you think we need to change? Like, what is the thing you think, like, if I had that magic wand, this would be it? I'd change just one thing about the sector.
not just about sustainability, but also accessibility and inclusion and all of that. We are making steps forward, but always constantly feels like one step forward, 20 steps back. And I feel like people are having conversations, but there's still that pushback. They're making, I don't want to say excuses, but they're coming up with reasons of why they can't do it. Budget, they don't have the knowledge, they just don't have the resources, the tools. And it's frustrating because I know that collectively as an industry, we can do better with sustainability and inclusion and accessibility. But trying to figure out how to get the sector from here to here has been really hard. So I think that would be one thing I would change, because everyone's so focused on themselves and what they're doing that they're not thinking about everyone else as a big picture.
Let's just, I mean, obviously, we've spoken years ago about accessibility, but just explain what you mean by accessibility, because everyone's heard of, ED, and the I sometimes gets a bit lost within that. But just explain what you mean by accessibility, just for those that might not be aware.
So accessibility is, I'm trying to think, I'm having a brain fart. I can't think of the definition, but accessibility is creating the experience that benefits everyone, including people with disabilities. So, for example, if you're planning a live event and you choose a venue without a wheelchair ramp or an elevator, you're not making it accessible. If you choose an event where the person has to go all the way around the back and then up a really janky surface elevator, that's not accessible. If you're having a virtual event and you choose a platform that doesn't have captioning, that's not accessible. If you have an event or experience with like really dark lights and a lot of stuff flying around, that's not accessible. So it's just thinking it during the design phase or even the venue hunting phase. Who am I excluding when I create this experience? We don't know who's going to come to our event, and we are all one day away from becoming disabled. We never know what's going to happen. So creating accessibility and inclusion from the start will create just a better experience overall, I think. For the captions example, did you know that 80% of people who use captioning are hearing? They don't have any hearing problems. 80%. So that means 20% of people who use captioning are the deaf and hard of hearing community.
Wow, is that, why do you think that is? What is that, an ease of use thing, or just people like me? I've never heard that stat before.
Well, some people are English as second language.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And some people, they may have screaming kids in the background, construction next door. They find it really hard to focus. They turn on captioning. You're on the train and you're watching a video. You forgot your headphones at home. You use it with captioning. Or even with captioning, it just helps you absorb what is being said more. Yeah. Have you ever watched something where someone has a really heavy accent and you're like, what on earth is this person saying? Captioning helps you hear and process what that person has just said.
Do you know what? It's thinking about it now. Like my wife and I watched, the House of Dragon series. We watched all of that on captions because of, there was so much things going on. What I never realized with captions, we found we got more from it because there was a group in the background that you just hear like a murmur and it would come on the screen like something. And I was like, oh, yeah. They're talking about, and I was like, I'm getting more from looking at from reading the captions. It was, I don't know why. Yeah, that's weird. That's just become part of my life, actually. And the thing that's really interesting there, and you said about experience, and I think is the thing that we need to realize as an industry. There is, I think, and look, you please correct me. I think there's a difference between accessibility and experience. If people think like that, we all saw that it was a concert, wasn't it, in America? And there was like an area for wheelchair users or disability. So the venue was like, great, accessibility, we've got an area. And then you saw the pictures of them and they were like a mile behind, with everything in front. So I think until, and you use the word experience a lot, I think until we recognize that, accessibility means that there is going to be a difference. You would, someone who has disabilities is going to have a different experience than I would. I think as long as we're not thinking, it's not like have the same experience, because that would be impossible. And I don't know if that sounds terrible, but I think it's about understanding that you have to build an experience for people that need that accessibility. You can't just shove them on at the end. And do you find it sort of almost like does it have stairs, rather than, okay, but these stairs are going up a fire escape or something like that? Do you see that? Do you think that's changing?
I don't think I see it changing quick enough, but one example that I love to use is Coldplay. So we all know about Coldplay, the band stopping their tours until they figured out a way to become more sustainable. A few months after they resumed, they published on social media that they also have an accessibility framework for what they're doing. And it was absolutely phenomenal. Like, the feedback on social media was just blew up in a positive way, because they thought about people with hearing loss. They have subpack vest. So when the music's playing, you can feel the beat on the vest, and at least two sign language interpreters at every concert. And for the blind or low vision, there's time before the concert to invite them on stage. They can feel, it's called tactile design. So they can feel the design. So during the concert, they can kind of picture what's going on in their minds. And for people with sensory sensitivities, they have separate spaces for them. So if they get overwhelmed, they're able to take a step back and just kind of take a moment. And so they thought of the big picture. And one thing I always say is, if you want people to reach out to you about accessibility requirements, put your email where I can find it in registration on your website. I usually spend 5 to 10 minutes looking around, where is an email where I can find this? And they just put it on their accessibility page right there saying, we're open to feedback. Please let us know how we can make this experience better for you. And I was like, they built that in to the way that they work. They're doing this at every concert, not because someone asked for it, but because they wanted to make the experience better for all of their attendees. And that really spoke to a lot of people.
I never thought in my life I would promote Coldplay, but well done. I mean, that is insane. And I think it's worrying as well, though, isn't it? That's seen as isn't this incredible? Because accessibility didn't just start on, last week, did it? And I mean, do you think, I suppose bringing that into you, do you think that's something, and whichever side you want to discuss about, but do you think that's an exciting area of change for you, or what do you see the most exciting change happening in, from your point of view?
I think going back to sustainability, because we still have a lot of work to do with sustainability, inclusion and accessibility, but going back to sustainability, with COP27 had just closed in Egypt last week, with that having been closed and the roadmap to net zero between IMEX and IBTM, I really do think that 2023 is going to be a massive year for people moving towards sustainability, whether it's becoming ISO certified, which is the highest sustainability standard you can get for a business, or a B Corp. We're seeing so many B Corps pop up here and there, and those are also really hard to get. I just think we're going to see so many people, businesses, events taking that extra step forward to be more sustainable. But with accessibility and inclusion, I'm not quite sure that there's big things going to be happening next year. I think it's still a bit of an uphill battle. I don't know if this is me being cynical because it affects me directly. Yes, we've still got some work to do.
And it's interesting that accessibility, it also really, I don't think it's filtered into the workplace, and I think, the recruitment side, if you think about virtual events, for example, or a lot of companies now do virtual interviews, and I'm not sure how that started. I had a conversation about 2 months ago with somebody who was saying to me, if someone's virtual, what do we need to provide? And I was like, oh, you're thinking about that. That's fantastic. And I think that accessibility in the workplace, I think it does. And I don't want to cause offense, but it gets forgotten about in EDI, doesn't it? It gets sort of, we know gender, we know race, that's something that I think a lot of people are happy now to have those conversations. And I think we see this with the Reach scholarship that we do. 90% of our industry is white, so there's actually 10% of people who it affects. For me, it's down to the 90% as well to stand up. And if you look at the numbers, the salary survey we did, I think there was just under 1,300 people. I think it was like 1% put down that they were not recognised, I can't think what the word is, but said they were disabled or, had a disability. So when you have that, it can get sort of like, well, unless it's in my face, do I do anything about it? I mean, how do you think that can change in recruitment or the workplace as well?
So I love this question. With interviews, Teams and Google Meet have captioning at my ends, so I'm able to turn it on without telling the interviewer that I need it turned on. So there's no bias there. Zoom is a bit of a tricky one because people prefer Zoom, and it's been a constant battle for me to get captioning on Zoom. So you have to turn it on at your end when you create the event. But then after you create the event and you forgot, you can't just go back and turn it on, apparently. So that's been kind of an uphill battle. So I always recommend use Teams or Google Meet, which will allow the person to be able to turn on captions at their end. And also, this only applies to the UK. So I'm sorry if you're listening outside of the UK. I don't know anything about this for you, but there's a scheme by the government called Disability Confidence Scheme UK. I can drop the link in the chat in the comments so that you guys can find it. And there's 3 steps that you take. So the first step is you learn about it. And then the next step, you do more. I can't remember the exacts. But when we did the opening and closing ceremonies for the Commonwealth Games, they became a disability confident scheme that you get a badge to put on your website, and that allows people who apply for your job know that the people inside the business know and are ready to be able to have someone with a disability, because not all disabilities are visible, they're also invisible. And I'm finding that more people in our ages are getting diagnosed with ADHD and autism because they didn't have that support. Back in the day, we just didn't have the knowledge and understanding when we were kids. So there's more people getting the diagnosis that they need, but then they still have that barrier of getting the support that they need from work. What can the job do to help them best? Usually we already know and we tell you. We just need you to be able to work with us.
It's interesting that, isn't it, as well, because there's that element of like, I don't have to tell you that I have disability. That's not something that people should, it's not an interview question, isn't it? What salary are you looking for? Do you have a disability? That can't happen. I think, and I did something at an event recently, and someone came up to me afterwards and said, I've never heard somebody do that. And I think it's me understanding, but you get these like put your hands up or stand up sort of things, and some people like them, some people didn't. And I'd asked the moderator before, and I'd said, if we could all stand up, if you don't feel comfortable standing up or you can't, you don't have to, please don't. And just saying that, somebody came up to me, and it wasn't a disability. She was like, I don't like, I'm very nervous. And she was like, but hearing you say that, and you think, oh, actually, I'm 46 and I can learn, it's, and I think you're right. It is also that, it's the accessibility in the workplace, and not making it sort of seem like it's a problem, but just making it seem it's natural. You can just, whoever you are, whatever the situation, it will just, make sure that you're comfortable. And I think that helps. Do you think that as well?
Yes. And the other misconception people get a lot is that it's expensive. It doesn't have to be expensive. We have technology with accessibility built in already. So for example, if you use Microsoft Teams at work, great. It's already pretty accessible because you've got captioning, you've got transcripts, you've got a lot of things already in place. And that's the same with Apple tools. Apple has been doing great work with accessibility. For example, I was just home a few weeks ago and I had to upgrade my iPhone. And iPhones, I believe 12 and above, have great captioning accessibility. Like you can call someone and then have a transcript of what's being said, so I can be on the phone with you and then read what's being said. I haven't tested it out yet because I text, I don't call. Anyone who knows me knows that I only text. If someone calls me, I will not be picking up. So there's already tools for free in place and the technology that we use. And then look at your building. If it's not accessible, can you let the person do remote work? Do they really need to come into the office every day? Does anyone really need to come to the office every day? You know, just thinking about these things, because accessibility is not just for people with disabilities, it also benefits everyone. So for example, you don't need to go to the office every day. Do you know who else that benefits? Parents. Yeah. And also, if you're worried about money, you just cut out commute costs.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. No, you're absolutely right. Oh, that's fantastic. That's actually a conversation I could have with you. An entirely different thing. I think you're very good at talking positively about the industry. You don't talk about yourself as much, do you? So I'm going to ask you a direct question about you and try and trump yourself. You know, put your own banner out there. But what do you think today? You know, because you've got a long career ahead of you. But what do you think today is something that you're most proud of? What would you say? That's what I'm most proud of.
That's a hard question because I'm not really good at tooting my own horn. I think what the work I'm doing and the steps I'm taking to change the world around me in a more positive way and influencing people in a positive way. Like, yes, it's hard, but we can't do it negatively. We can't bully people into doing change. So thinking about the best ways, how can I encourage and maybe handhold a little bit people into doing those change, and then seeing that change. Like, I feel like a little mama bird watching the little baby fly away for the first time. I think I'm most proud of the work that I'm doing right now.
And I think it's that positivity. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think if sustainability, if accessibility, people think they're being like hit with a hammer, the natural reaction is like, don't you tell me, or, you know, what, or unfortunately, and I bet you've had this, people would say, well, what have you got there? Like, they just assume immediately that because you're talking about accessibility, you must be disabled, or because you're talking about sustainability, you're, you know, a different, like you said, you were old. There's no way you're bloody old. But I've always seen you, you know, especially during the pandemic, you know, it's that voice as well. And it sometimes must be hard feeling like you're a lone voice, and you know, and to keep that positivity, like the whole Zoom thing, I find that incredible. That I just cannot believe that, you know, especially that they blew up during the pandemic, that somebody at Zoom hasn't just said, hang on a minute. You know?
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but what keeps me going with being the lone voice is remembering that there's people coming up behind me. If I can struggle but make it easier for them, then it's worth it, because someone else ahead of me struggled so I can have the things that I have today. Like the American for Disabilities Act, I think just came in like 1990. I could be very, very wrong, and something else came in 1990. That was the year I was born. So that gave rights to people with disabilities. If that never came, I would have not gotten the support that I needed to get through my schooling, my university, and just to be able to live life day to day. So that's an example of someone who struggled ahead of me to make sure that their people coming up behind them have it easier. So if I can just keep going every day and just keep trying my best, then that means people coming up behind me, like your children, someone's children, will have it so much easier. So I think that's when it gets really hard, I have to remember it's not about me. It's about people coming up behind me.
That is amazing. Like, that's so you as well, Meg. That's thinking of others as well. You're wonderful. I mean, talking about going back, like if you yourself could go back, say 5 years, like 5 years ago, what would you tell yourself 5 years ago, either about, you know, your career, or, you know, what advice would you give yourself?
So actually 5 years ago when I had that absolutely horrible recruitment experience. Yeah, it's exactly 5 years ago. I had hit an all-time low. I was really depressed. I couldn't find a job. I didn't know what I was doing with my life. I was like, I don't know where I'm going from here. So if I could go back in time to that Meg, I would say, keep going. It gets better. You have so many adventures ahead of you. You're going to meet some really incredible people. Just keep your head up and get going. It gets better.
And
network.
I'm so glad we spoke. You've made my week better, I'll tell you that. What about other people? What advice, a lot of, one of the reasons we did this was, we're trying to increase the talent pipeline. We're trying to help people look at events as a career rather than, let's say, probably not negatively, but it's probably seen as quite fluffy and soft is how it used to be seen. But what advice would you have for others looking to either, get into the sector, or maybe for you, like get into sustainability? But let's do two questions. Advice for people to get into the sector, and advice for people to bring sustainability maybe to their workplace or their sort of clients.
So for both of them, I have another different answer for sustainability, but to get into the events industry, network. I've seen so many people get collaborations, jobs, everything, make new friends, make new networks just by being on Twitter and engaging in conversations and asking questions. That's actually how I got my job. So Gabby, if you're watching this, thank you. Gabby and I have met on Twitter because of a weekly Twitter conversation by Events Prop Stock. And we got to know each other better over like the following year by engaging on Twitter. We had never, ever met in person, mind you. And she's the one who saw the post on LinkedIn and said, Meg, this is a great fit for you. I saw this and immediately thought of you. And this is someone I've never met in person. So you never know who's going to think of you as soon as they see an opportunity. You just never know. And don't be afraid to reach out. People love to talk. And especially since I've noticed since the pandemic, people are more open to giving a little bit of time to help people who want to get into the industry. So don't be afraid. I know Twitter is currently going through a dumpster fire at the moment. So maybe don't go on Twitter, maybe try LinkedIn. People want to engage, people want to help you. When you add someone new on LinkedIn, please, I beg you, add a message of why you're adding them, especially if there's someone that you saw their post and you liked it. I have so many people adding me. I'm like, oh, this looks like a cool person. And then they never sent a message. I'm like, okay, so are they waiting for me? Or it's just this whole awkward thing. For sustainability, what I see people struggle with a lot is language. So there's a lot of language that people don't quite understand. There are tons of resources you can use. I can actually also add them. I don't know which way the chat is. I can add them into the chat. There's tons of newsletters that help kind of, I don't want to say dumb down the language, but make it more clear what they're talking about. Do a ton of readings and don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, part of the reason why I do what I do is because I come from an events background and I'm passionate about sustainability. So I need to figure out a way, how can I merge it together and make it easier for event organizers to understand how do I get from point A to point B when I don't understand net carbon emissions, like what does this number mean? I help them understand and the steps that they can take to do better.
That's amazing. I think, yeah, was that Irina, the Event Pros talk, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Irina, because and I think you're absolutely right. There's a worrying trend at the moment now, I think, about people being online wanting to be influencers, whereas for me, the online community was exactly about that, supporting one another. And I hope we get back to that. I really do. And you're a huge advocate of that, and that's how we met, wasn't it? That's exactly how we met all those many years ago. Well, listen, Meg, we've come to the end. I hope that wasn't too scary. I hope that was okay. Didn't feel too bad. That was amazing. You've shared so many ideas and insights. I'm sure everyone listening or watching has now got a deeper insight into who you are, your love for the industry and journey, especially obviously the sustainability and accessibility. That was very, very enlightening. Thank you. I'm sure you've inspired many, many others during the episode. So thank you for that, Meg. As a reminder, we're currently streaming live. You can watch or listen. This is going to be around for eternity. I'm not sure if that's a good thing, but fingers crossed it is. stay updated for the next episode. You can visit my LinkedIn profile to turn on notifications. You can be reminded of future episodes, or to stay in the know about event recruitment. Please do follow Meg, of course. Meg's content is wonderful. She shows up, consistency, and the positivity is fantastic. I want to thank the audience for joining us live. Meg, any final comments from you?
No, just thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, not a problem at all. It's lovely to see you. Thanks, Meg. Thank you. Now, that's a wrap for episode 2. There's enough bullshit already in the world, so don't make recruitment harder and don't put it at the side of the desk.